Next up is the 148th State Assembly District. Joining us is the Democratic candidate, Ross Scott. Mr. Scott, you've been provided 4 questions, and we'd like to begin by asking you to respond to the question about how you would promote employment opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we need you to unmute. Sorry, you've been muted, so you just need to unmute before you begin.
Good morning to you and to everybody else that's watching. It would have been great to be able to listen to and see what others had to say before me, since I'm a newcomer to the political world. And it's been 20 years since I've been deeply involved in disability law. I'll just say just a few seconds about my background. I had a foster child come to live with us when he was 6. By the time he was a teenager, it was clear that he had something seriously wrong with him. And since we knew that his mother was in a nursing home with Huntington's, he had juvenile form. He lived with us off and on until he was 40, and he died in our home. We had him here taking care of him 24/7 for the last 5 years of his life. So I had some fairly intense experience, both personally and on the law side, since I'm also a lawyer. The employment of disabled persons is terribly tough now and is just going to get worse because the unskilled jobs are getting scarcer and scarcer. I don't really have an idea for what it's going to take to improve that situation. Perhaps there are new jobs, types of employment that will open up for disabled persons, and people are disabled in many different ways. So those that, for instance, have autism are now being actually sought by companies, from what I've seen reported on television shows, are being sought by companies to do some very detailed work, and they do it much more efficiently. And I'm thinking of some kind of auditing type work that I saw. I don't know what other kinds of creative possibilities there are, but we need to look for them. Disabled people, whether it's intellectually disabled or physically disabled, have ways in which they can care for others. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic is throwing just everything upside down, so that disabled persons who need, for instance, ARC services aren't even able to get them. In our county, I looked at the recent today's website, and the buses that come and pick disabled persons up and bring them to their services are no longer running. When that gets started again, I don't know.
We're just about out of time, so I'll give you a minute to wrap that up, and then we'll have a brief final question.
Okay. I don't know how much wrap up I can do, except that I'll say that I, as a lawyer, from time to time, I have disabled persons that I take on, usually pro bono. In fact, always pro bono, to try to help them work through the wickets that county social services and state social services provide for them to try to hop through, sometimes when they're not good hoppers.
Okay, well, we'll just jump to our second and final question. We have self-advocate Hannah Breger has a final question for you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Scott. What are your thoughts on people with disabilities being a part of our community, and what do you think can be done to reduce barriers to full participation.
In what kind of community was that? Participants in what kind of community?
Our community, yes.
Our being the non-disabled community?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think a lot more education of the non-disabled needs to be done to learn the value and the reality and the character of the disabled is just as good as their own. I think we have a bad education problem with teaching people what people are really like. That's in the schools, it's in the culture. We have a terrible TV culture. We have a video game culture that does nothing to educate the populace on the fact that we're all humans of equal worth. And the disabled should be brought in. If they're your next door neighbor, invite them over. Play Scrabble if they can play Scrabble. Play cards if they can play cards. Go with them. There was a Down syndrome young man that would come for summers to a cabin down the road from my place. And I would get his parents to let me, he was in his 20s, I was older, they would let me take him to a local bar in the nearby village where I would have a beer, he would have a Coca-Cola, and we would play pool for an hour or two. That
Okay.
kind of thing.
Thank you. I think we have to leave it there. We're out of time. We really appreciate your time and your participation. We wish you the best of luck.
Okay, I thank you. And
Okay.
anybody who wants to get in touch with me can do so. My campaign, and I will provide, when I can, pro bono legal services to disabled persons that are aware of this. My campaign number is 716-379-3224. That rings in my home, 716-379-3224, and I will get back to anyone that calls.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day.